Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you. Guess what time it is?
What time is it?
It's the Connected Life podcast time.
Yeah? Is that what that is? What was that?
You looked so disappointed when that's
Abby
what
says,
I
I want to take this. I want to start this podcast off. I'm like, okay. You got a way you want to start it? And that's what you started with? I hand the ship over to you only to sink it in the first 2 seconds of the entire thing. Do you know how many people we lost on that? They're like, I don't know what that was. I'm done.
It's funny.
All right. Well, what are we doing today?
Oh, I'm so excited about today. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, we have a
Stop
special guest
right now and go back and listen to it.
Yeah, don't even listen until you listen to that.
Yeah.
We have a special guest named Megan, and she is here with us. We love her dearly, and she, I think, is she's so wise. I was going to say professional at dating, but I was like, that sounds
goals
bad.
in life, everyone.
So
I want to be
wise.
a life professional at dating.
Yeah.
She's so wise at dating, and every time she shares about a part of her journey, I'm like, everybody needs to hear this. And so I finally was like, no, I'm demanding you come on our podcast.
She did.
So that everyone can hear this, because it's just gold. You've spent years learning wisdom, how to relate to, and part of it is you learned about how to relate to humans, how to connect to yourself, how to do brave communication. You learned a lot of skills that, and all of those things are so helpful in dating.
It's true.
In life.
Yes.
In dating and in life. Yeah.
That's real.
So we had her on last week and we started, and this week I just wanted to jump in and we're going to talk a little bit more about the process of dating, so that you guys, if you are dating, you can feel encouraged and known and understood. And if you are married, some of these things can apply about how to communicate, but then other things will be very helpful for the singles around you.
So thanks for joining us again, Megan.
Yes.
So happy to be here after Abby took about 6 months to talk me into doing it.
Well,
Just
it took you a
bending
year
that
and a
arm.
half to decide to online date after you thought about it.
That's true.
So 6 months means I killed it.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
you
a
did
very
pretty well.
intentional person in what I do.
You are very intentional.
Yes.
Okay, well, why don't you tell us, would you give us just a snapshot of the overall journey you've been on, and give us a summary of the beginning and then the ebbs and flows and what the experience of dating has been like for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it took me about a year, and from the time I thought I'm not doing a great job at meeting people, and I honestly asked all my friends, is there something I should be doing, places I should be going, where should I be putting myself out at? And I found we don't really know. And so I'm like, and
That's
I also
so defeating.
It was a little. And I also said, if you want to set me up, I'm open to that, which before, I feel like for years I had this, don't talk to me about this because I have shame here. And so no one would. And then all of a sudden I started having conversations and trying to figure that out. And
what was the instigator that broke the shame?
I think it was, sometimes pain is way more motivating. And I'm like, the lack of this not in my life.
Yep.
Of I actually want to be married. I do want to have kids. But I'm not being proactive. I'm asking people, but again, it's everything I'm doing is what should I be doing? Do you know someone? And I'm like, where should I go? And it just felt like I don't feel powerful in this place at all. And so then I felt like I was super controlling at first with it. So I wrestled with it.
I'm going to pause you really quick. So something that you said that I just wanted to highlight because it was so good is the first step was probably just starting to have conversations about it with people where you began breaking out of shame.
Right.
So before it was we don't even talk about the fact that I'm not dating. And then it was, okay, let's talk about it, and then let's brainstorm solutions. And then
because I wanted to do anything but online date because I was like, I think I know I said this before. I was like, well, I don't want that to be my story. And then I was like, but you know what? I want a story.
Right.
And 30%, I think at least it used to be 30% of people are meeting online. And I'm like, Well, if
that
this
gives
is,
you better odds.
like,
Yeah.
I need to improve my odds because this little town I do not seem to be successful here. You know, where I was like, should I move from this town? Like all these things you start to wonder. And so I'm like, okay, I don't want to. And I like my community. I like my life. I like what I'm doing. And I need to actually act powerfully in this area and not wait for something to come happen to me.
Right. So then you start dating and it's high stakes in the beginning.
Everything
and you're
is
having
scary.
to learn the rules
Yep.
and you're not sure.
High emotions.
Yes. And
First conversation, I literally feel like I was going to throw up when they called me because it felt,
Really?
oh, it was so scary. It was like, I'm giving them my number. They can track me. They can find me. And then all of a sudden I was like, I just like made it so like, oh my gosh, like it was all my, every what if was never positive. Like, what if you actually meet someone you want to date versus it was like, what if they're horrible and what if they're married and what if they're like every what if initially was was scary.
right.
Oh, and until you shifted it to like.
And then I started, then it was still like, I'd say the first 4 or 6 months of like, I had no habits here.
Right.
Like, how do you start to flirt this way and talk to someone and not make it, and not to know everything? And just like, how do you actually learn how to date
Relate.
and relate in this way?
Yeah.
And so like, I had to kind of learn real skills of like, how do I do this that feels real to me and feels like I'm using wisdom, I'm protecting my heart, I'm not putting myself fully out there, but I'm not closed off. And like, I think they're different for everyone, but like I had to learn how I didn't know me in this space.
That's a great way to say it. So what would you tell us about, I know you talk about like a lot of this is a risk and but you are one of the best people at choosing vulnerability, but also choosing wisdom. And most people it's one or the other. They're either like super critical and what is it called when you're expecting the worst case all the time? Pessimistic, like, or they're super open and naive, like they're overly protected or they're underly protected.
Yeah.
You do a
Right.
good job of both. So why don't you let's start with the risk part and the vulnerability. What has that journey been like for you?
The risk part, once I got over like, literally, I feel like I had to learn skills and like, I don't like you. And there were a lot of like, I'm not interested. And we do another date, but doing it out of like not the bad but like, this is a good process. This is a good process. Like I'm not taking advantage. I'm just going through it. But like when you first really like someone, I think that's where all of a sudden you're like, the vulnerability piece starts to go in. Cause like, you're not just like, okay, you're really interesting on text. Oh, you're fun to talk to and super interesting. And then you meet and you're like, woohoo. Like I am like physically attracted to you. You are clearly physically attracted to me.
You're like, wow, win here.
We are having great conversations. And I would say, and all of a sudden there's this hope of this thing you want in life. And then all of a sudden you could start to put a face to it. So it's a little bit like what we talked about like earlier with those virtual relationships where people are wanting a fake relationship. You can quickly, because now like, no, it's a real person.
Right.
I can see it. And I'm like, and if you've talked for a bit and like in that conversation, you just start to have some more candid conversations about things versus if you randomly met. And all of a sudden you can really quickly start to make up and let your emotions really go down a road fast. And I found for myself that when I was like, oh, I'm interested, I had to, and I didn't do great at first. I remember like a couple times talking with you and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm having this conversation and I feel so excited. And wow, I just like everything kind of, you don't have boxes because you have to have them checked off, but the boxes for me almost feel like values.
Yeah. Core
and so
values.
like all of a sudden, like, it's not like, oh, you have a house and you have a car and like you make 6 figures. It's like, oh, you value emotional connection and you seem really connected with that. And you can like understand when you make mistakes and like all these things where like all of a sudden like that conversation feels really real, but you're funny and like we've got good chemistry and you're witty. And that's when all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I better freaking manage my heart because I'm like, I'm running down a path and I'm further ahead. And so
you know your tendency
for
is
sure.
when you start seeing the green lights, like, oh, I would say red lights are like, oh, our core values don't line up here. But so sometimes you have yellow lights, which is like, I can't tell if our core values. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then green lights are like, oh, we have the same core value here.
Totally.
So you're basically like a Corvette that is like, when you see green lights, you just want to like,
I want to
go 100 miles
because
down
this
the
is the thing I
tires up
want.
and go.
I'm like, okay,
Yes.
finally, it's not this. It's like, and in your head initially, like, it's not virtual or fake. It's a real person.
Yes.
But again, I only have so much information, and I'm putting so much stuff on them, and it puts so much pressure and makes it need to be something versus discovery.
Right.
Right. As a side note, the minute I can speak, I think for guys, girls probably have the same feeling, but I'm just going to speak from the male perspective. The minute it feels like this girl has gone super fast down the road in their head, as far as that goes, it feels so overwhelming to a guy. And it's a fast way for a guy to be like, nope, out, out. She feels, the word will be needy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that word needy comes up around the idea of like, she's pulling for me to be something. Like if we get down under it, she's pulling for me to be something in her head that she thinks that I am.
Yeah.
And I can feel it, and I'm not that. I don't even know where I'm at yet with this.
Yeah. I think for me, a lot of this has to do with pacing. And I think pacing is a hard skill to learn.
Especially if you happen to be dating someone who doesn't live in the same city.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that, like I've had both. And so when you don't live in the same city, all of a sudden when you're together, we have to be so intentional.
Right.
And it makes it harder and high stakes.
Yeah.
So it's like that all becomes real things when you're like dating someone who lives an hour and a half away and not in your town. And so it creates its own complications of not insurmountable, but you have to navigate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So you, after you kind of have settled in a little bit, tell us about some of the lows and then how you've like kept hope in the dating process.
I think some of the, I guess when I think about the lows, they actually come from the highs
Okay.
of, I remember meeting, when was it? A little over like a year and a half ago. And it was super quick, like 3 or 4 texts. He's like, I'm super interested. Let's go grab a drink. And I was like, okay. And I felt very neutral. Like I had zero feelings about this guy. I'm like, why? Like to me, like that request was like, no big deal. So he's like, I want to take you to a place you like. So you pick, tell me, you give me 3 options that you really love, and then I'll pick it. So I was like, okay. And I remember, meeting him, and his name was Brandon, and he was like, there was instant chemistry, like super funny guy, really witty, highly successful.
Yeah.
Great. But I mean, way more successful than I have even come close to being like within his business. And we sit there and we talk for 5 hours.
Wow.
And like, it's not
Felt
like
easy. It felt normal.
Oh,
I've
and
noticed.
he's affectionate, but appropriately affectionate, and he's verbally affectionate, but appropriately verbal. Like it just felt like so right.
Right.
And he's clearly interested, and I am super interested. And then he walks me to my car and like gave me a hug, but like, he's like, I can't wait to see you again. And it was one of those very gentlemanly, all that stuff. And I would say some of this, I can see now retrospectively too, that first week, he was initiated. I mean, I think I saw him 4 or 5 times that first week.
Wow.
And in my heart, I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I like this guy. I feel so pursued. We start talking about faith. And one of my things I've told people, which I don't need to know right away, but I'm like, hey, my faith is a big deal to me. And it's not something I need you to like be anywhere, but eventually that's something I don't want you to be okay with. I want to share with someone.
Yeah.
Long term.
That's great.
And that conversation often comes up later. It's not like, that's not a first conversation. But he started asking me about that. He's like, I would love to go to church with you. I would love you to be my friends. I would love, I had to go to San Francisco for work. I was just missing you, and I want to come back and just have a coffee with you. And you're just like, oh my gosh, he likes me so much, and I like him so much. And I'm like, I've never felt so intentionally pursued by someone.
Yeah.
And we ended up, it just was like that. It was so engaged. And the mistake I made was I totally let him, the way he was pacing it,
drive the pace
of my heart. I did not actually manage. I'm like, wait, this has only been like 3 weeks so far. And then like within a month, he's like, hey, I like you so much. I had a trip to San Francisco. He was like, could I drive you down there? So and we could spend the day. And he's like, asked me to be his girlfriend. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like, I'm like, this is it. And in your head, you're like, you've made it. Like I totally like, this is it. Like I can just feel it. And it stayed that way. Like he paced it, like what he was communicating, what he was saying about me. But it just like, but it was all in person and like, and would say things like, oh, that type of house we're going to get someday. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's talking.
He started futuristic talking.
Very much. Yes. But it didn't feel premature.
It wasn't manipulative.
No,
right. It didn't feel manipulative. No. It felt like it was genuine from where he was at, but it was early. Like,
but there were a couple of things like that popped up where I'm just like some things like he starts, as people start to open up and you hear some stuff about his childhood. And I'm like, wow, you've been through some tough stuff. And some of the way he's handled some of those things or some past relationships. I'm like, wow. And I would talk with friends and like, well, these are, most people can put on and it's not like, it's not a manipulative put on, but like, you're going to see the best version of them.
Absolutely.
They're like, it's almost like when someone's like, and I don't like try like an alcoholic, like they can strong arm something for about 3 to 4 months.
Exactly.
And then afterwards, like you're going to start to discover like, oh, what are your issues? What are my issues? What are our issues that we trigger in each other?
Megan, this is such an important thing I say this all the time. I can't believe you said the same timeline and I don't think we've ever talked about this. It's so true. For 3 to 4 months, people are giving you the best version of themselves.
Totally.
So I tell anybody I know who's dating, like, do not make a decision about your future before you're 4 months in. Don't choose somebody. Don't run too, like, that's
run
the
too
most
far down the road
important
in your head.
Time to manage your speed.
So in my head, I totally ran down that path. Like he was setting the pace and I ran right along with him.
Yeah, totally.
Like I'm like,
you were following.
I was totally following. And then all of a sudden I could start to feel like he started getting vulnerable and shared some pretty vulnerable things about things that happened to him. That I'm like, my heart hurts so bad for like the little boy that happened to. But like, I can see him like, oh, he medicates with fun. And like, and he was like, let's do this. Let's go on this trip. Let's go on this hike. Like it was always super fun and adventuresome and like going with me to church every week. And like once, like I want to meet your community. I want to be part of it. We did Thanksgiving together, like just doing life together.
Wow.
And then, around Christmas time, I'm like, you're like, and after he shared some really vulnerable things, I'm like, you're withdrawing. I'm like, hey, what's going on?
Oh,
and
it got a little too real for him. A little too vulnerable.
Too real.
And we hit a point where you just start having more real conversations where I'm like, oh, wait, I can see how much anxiety you actually have. And you're telling me about anxiety. All of a sudden, like, you're telling me about hard things. And I'm like, hey, which is an interesting thing because like you kind of like, I can help you. I actually have friends and community and like I know
have tools.
I do. And so it was an interesting journey to start to walk into where you're like, if you want, I can give you suggestions. I don't want to be your counselor because that'd be a really unhealthy place to be, but I would want to be a support.
Yeah.
So here are things, but I don't need you to do anything. And so we start having those conversations and like, then I start feeling that like he's in and he's out. He's in it. Like it just kind of is blowing hot and cold. And at that point, like I would say, like I had let my heart get to feelings of love for sure. Hadn't communicated that by any means. And so at that point, you just have to start like, you start super scared where you're like, because now all of a sudden it's something you want, you need, like I would say I was getting close to the point, like I need this to work. What do I have to do to make this work?
Yeah.
Versus what do is this healthy?
Yeah.
And good for both of us?
Yeah.
And
a lot of this is self-awareness, actually knowing you get to a point when you would give up you to make something work. And it's important to know that happens to you.
And it was at 4 months where it all kind of started going down.
Yep.
And it was at 5 months where it all, I had so many friends who were like, within 6 months, you'll know.
Yeah.
And it was right at like a little after 5 months where all of a sudden I'm like, I was like, I remember all of a sudden I was having an awareness in the relationship where I was not communicating needs. Like when, like if he did something, like I was not like, that's hurt. Like it's not an accusatory, like, that's hurtful.
Yeah.
That made me sad. And so I can like, and I can remember him saying things like, I can't handle seeing you sad. If I made you sad.
Started communicating.
I was just small, like, hey, like, I understand what's going on, but like it's hurtful when you withdraw that way and don't talk to me. And was being really careful with my words because, I didn't want to be accusatory. But I remember one time, like, I was like, wait, I'm doing so many more things for him, like, because I want to, not out of like manipulation, but I'm like, oh, I'm just not seeing, not like people have bad seasons, but like there's just no reciprocation going on in this relationship for these last few weeks. And so I can remember like going over to his house to like, I'd pick something up for him. And I was just like, he'd been super withdrawn. I'm like, I'm going to just be sad. I'm going to actually show him sadness. And like, cause that feels not anger, accusation. And I'm like, so telling him like, he's like, how are you? I'm like, I felt really sad the last few days. Like, I know you have a lot going on, but you're not really giving me the words. And like, I just feel hurt and I don't understand what's going on. And and I remember like, I was like, it was the first time I was like fully like, I'm not hiding my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going away for the weekend. It's actually a year to this weekend because it was Martin Luther King weekend, which is funny. Sorry, I just think that. But then I got I ended up getting an email from him. Which I'm like, and he said just like basically like, it was actually a very kind email. Yeah. But he broke up with me. Yeah. And I was pissed because I was just like, I was like, not that he broke up with me. Yeah. But the way he chose to do it.
Totally. Right. After you guys having such a relationship together. Yeah. Oh, by the way, here's an email. Yeah. Really? Right. A friggin' email?
It felt super cowardly to me. Like and I'm just like, oh, there's like, and so I end up like writing him like, hey, you get to make this choice. You got a lot going on, but for you to not actually give me the value and the dignity to look me in the eyes and to tell me what's going on and to actually allow me to ask questions feels so hurtful, so devaluing, so disrespectful. Yeah. Like I'm so like hurt by you right now, which, like I had stuff. He had some things at my house. I had things at his house with like helping stuff, but he would not meet me. Like he was
really,
oh no, like
that much avoidance.
Oh, there was so much where at that point, like he was like, oh, let me know when I should drop this off. Like, and I was like, it'd be really helpful for me. And he was like,
face to face.
He would not. Wow. So I've never
seen him again.
Never. And and I was kind of, he lived like a mile and a half away. And so like I was a little annoyed at myself because not like you don't want to be that girl like, what's going on? Who looks like crazy showing up at someone's house. But I'm like, oh, I would like, if I had to say like what didn't go well, I'm like, one, I didn't communicate when things got hard, my emotions enough. I let my feelings get I let him set the pace rather than managing what's actually healthy. Mm-hmm. And then I also didn't, I wanted to look him in the eyes. Yeah. And just have that conversation.
A closure conversation.
Yeah. I needed, and I didn't push that. So yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you hit a real low.
Absolutely.
Then, so how did you get hope back? Well, to go on the journey more.
Well, first I was super controlling. Like literally when I got that, I literally like opened the app because I had it for a month, and I like swiped like 8 times, and I'm like, I'm powerful. Like you're not in control. And then I was like, oh wow, that was so an awesome reaction to me feeling hurt and disappointed, and like it took some space because I'm like, I actually need to grieve.
Good for you.
What he was, what I hoped he was, what I hoped we would be. Yes. Conversations. And so took some time. And then just kind of like, I didn't want to. I don't know, a couple months. Yeah. And then I started doing it again.
Which I feel like is so important because lots of people just start dating right away. Mm-hmm. Or they never go back. Mm-hmm. Those are the two options. They either like just shove the pain down. Yeah. Let me get into a new relationship so I don't feel pain.
Run well past it.
Or I'm never going to do this again so I don't feel pain. People are just trying to avoid pain all the time in dating. Yes. And so I love it because you're like, I'm actually going to grieve this. I'm going to feel, and then I'm going to engage again.
Yeah. And I actually like asked friends, I'm like, hey, I wrote a ton of friends, like, I feel super hopeless. I feel really sad right now. I actually need some of your belief for me in this.
Love that.
Because otherwise I'm like, I don't have it right now, and I don't want to partner with hopelessness.
Yes.
So like, anything you feel or any like encouragement, like please send it to me, because like I need that right now, because like I don't have it.
That's so healthy and so powerful to actually just have a voice, and this is where I'm at. And I do that all the time too when I need people to like faith and hope are such valuable things that we need people to partner.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say about adding hope?
No, I mean, that was the main, I think, like there was this crazy good podcast I listened to by, oh gosh, I'm not going to remember her name.
We can link it.
Okay, great. And it literally, like, I probably listened to it 10 times. It was about her dating journey, how she went on. She's ended up getting married, but like, it was just this really beautiful story. Her name, Mia Fields, from Hillsong. And it just like, I was like, for some reason it felt like there was literally like a spirit of hope on it.
Love
so
that.
I just, every time I start to feel sad, I'm like, I'm gonna go listen to that again.
Love that.
And like over and over again. It would just really helped me.
Well, you know, in this situation, he emailed you.
Yes.
He didn't ghost you. But what do you do when somebody ghosts you? Because that's a real thing.
It happens.
Right. And for those of you who don't know, I would assume everyone knows, but maybe there's people who out there who don't know what ghosting is. But ghosting is when you're in someone's world and then you just disappear out of nowhere.
Well, there's a mixture. So I'd say like sometimes you're just talking to someone and like it just fades off. So no big deal. And then sometimes you're supposed to meet someone. I'm trying to think. No, I've never had a scheduled date where someone hasn't shown up. But I have had though, like this past late summer, someone started talking to, and again, oh my gosh, lots of chemistry, really fun, super respectful, and he'd been through like, again, crazy hard childhood, which if you have a bad hot childhood, not a bad thing. But I mean, he lived like an hour and a half away. And so we had to talk on the phone a lot. But I mean, we would have like 4-hour conversations.
Wow.
Which you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm getting so emotionally engaged and getting to hear about him. Yep. He has a child, like, and I'm getting to hear all this, and he's gone through some hard things. And we probably hung out 8-10 times. Like, I mean, you know, which that's not
it's building connection.
Right. And so it was really, really liked him, had a lot of interest, had a couple red flags. So I'm like, I saw the flags this time where with previous one, I was like, I'm all in. I see him, but I'm like, don't worry. We can get through it together.
Yeah.
Totally.
So this one, I'm like, okay, I can see it. And then I remember like, didn't hear from him. Like he had gone on this, he one night opened up, super vulnerable, like cried on the phone.
Wow.
And I was like, again, same thing. You have childhood stuff to work through. Hey, I have something that might be helpful. Like, I'm not trying to fix you.
Yeah.
Please, I would do anything to make this anxiety stop. Any connections you have. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. I feel so supported. I'm like, oh my gosh, you want to go after emotional like health. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And then went silent. And I was like, and so like texted him a couple of times, like, hey, just checking in. Are you okay? And I actually hit the point.
They both shared their vulnerable things and then bounced.
And then they took out.
The funny thing is that you actually responded so well to both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like you blew up and were terrible.
Or we're like, what's wrong with you?
But I did hear from him, and I was like, actually legitimately for at this point, like, wait, we have spent a couple months.
Yeah.
Like we weren't officially exclusively dating, but there's time here. And I'm like, what I regret the most about my previous relationship was I actually didn't get closure. So I'm like, and I didn't, and I'm like, I'm not gonna like live in this weird, what if you're dead? What if you got hurt? What if like all these things you're like, and I'm like, the likelihood of this being true is so small.
Totally.
But I would rather be
proactive.
More so I was like, you know what? I would rather believe the best and look foolish than harden my heart.
Love that.
That's good.
And so I actually went, like where he lived was like a little over an hour away, and I drove there.
Yeah.
And I was
my
like,
gosh, what did he look like when you showed up on the doorstep?
Shocked. And like,
he was like, oh,
hi.
Yeah.
So glad to see you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just like super surprised. Like, just want to check in. I haven't heard from you. And like, we've been talking every day.
Yeah.
And what's going on? And
you made him own it.
Come on.
You made him own it.
And like, I had this fear for not
boys
going.
to men, right?
Yes, indeed. But I didn't want, I'm like, I don't want to look like one of those crazy stalker girls. Like, what's going on? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to. I'm like, hey, I feel really confused. I feel hurt. And I was like, don't communicate blame. I'm like, I feel really hurt. What's going on? And we end up having this long 4-hour conversation. But I'm a little like, he's like, and he starts saying things like, oh my gosh, you're everything in me wants you to be the one. You're everything. And I'm just like, and again, you're like, oh, and I'm like, oh, I think this is going to happen again. Like
Totally.
you're not there.
You're not ready.
And so we talk a little bit, and all of a sudden, but he's like, I'm still dealing with some stuff, and then again did it again, and went quiet again, and I was just like, are you kidding? Like, and so I wrote a pretty strong email or strong text, and just to communicate, like, this is what you've told me about the man you are. This is what you communicate are your values.
Wow.
I don't see any of that being expressed right now in the way you're choosing to communicate to me. And just gave I'm like, this is really hurtful. It's super disappointing. And just kind of like left it at that. But I'm like, I felt like I didn't need to go down again. I'm like, we clearly know what's going on. And then at that point, I'm like, oh, I'm chasing something that I don't need to chase.
Yes.
But I had the conversation, and I felt way better because I'm like, no, I wrapped up the conversation. I did what I needed to do.
Yes. And I also like that I would say for a lot of people, it'd be easy to stay in that cycle and get lost in the anxiety of like, well, maybe I just need to give it more time, and maybe I just need to, and how many times? It's like, how many times does someone have to keep going back to the same thing before they go, no, you've shown me who you are, and that you're not bad for it. I'm just going to accept that and not be scared of not having something again and remove myself.
Totally. Like, I'm not chasing you. I actually think both men and women have a responsibility and pursuit, but it looks different.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, if we're mutually meeting each other in this, like, I should be pursuing you, but I'm not chasing you. And there's a difference.
Yeah. I love that so much. And I like that you took power. Like, I'm going to have a voice. One of the things you do so well is I'm not going to blame them. And you use vulnerable language. So it's not you devastated me. It's I feel hurt. I feel confused. I feel surprised, like whatever that is. And you aren't attacking their identity. Yeah. It's just, I'm also going to have a voice for myself. And one of the things I love about you is when you communicate like that, you don't feel vulnerable about doing that.
That doesn't feel hard to me now.
Yeah.
It used to, but now it doesn't, especially in that instance.
Because I think when I was younger, communicating I had hurt feelings made me feel like I was a schlup.
A schlup.
No, that's when I was younger, I never would communicate I had hurt feelings. It would be I communicate anger or indifference. Yeah. Because those felt like powerful dating emotions.
Oh, for sure. I'm fine. No big deal. You didn't hurt me. You didn't hurt me. And I was like,
I wasn't that interested.
No, I need to make sure, like, no, I've actually given you enough space to actually cause me pain, and I've taken the risk because that's actually vulnerable in that process. But that's scary. But you don't do that right away. But I'm like, I'm like, no, I've given you enough space that I get to risk being really hurt by you now.
But you're owning your story by being honest like that, by actually being like, no, this hurt, instead of pretending that it doesn't. But then
instead
you're not.
Like, oh, he's just a jerk. He doesn't matter. No, I'm sad. I give him
and
space.
you don't, like, it's easy to start drawing conclusions about yourself there. So I'm like, oh, what does this say about me? And why is this happening? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I think I have to, like, this is information that I knew.
Yep.
Like, things like, this is a little red flag. And I'm like, it doesn't make me say don't do it, but it does make me say, be aware you might bump into something.
Yes.
And so I'm like, okay, and then we bumped.
Yes. And I think too, when you say it hurt my feelings, you aren't looking, and this is the difference, you're not looking for them to fix it. You're not saying, this hurt my feelings. No. Now make me feel good.
No.
Now tell me what I want to hear. Now be like, and that is a very powerless way to communicate feelings.
I want them to own it, because I think in this dating world where all of a sudden you're meeting people and swiping, we dehumanize people.
Absolutely.
So for me, it's like, no. Like, we have started a relationship and started to connect. And I'm like we actually these are real people. Yeah. This isn't like, especially once you get past the first initial, I'm like, you should know that. That's important, and own that.
Absolutely.
I think there's a huge responsibility to humanity in the dating process, in that concept. When it's like, this isn't just texting anymore. We've been on multiple dates. This is a real person with real feelings who's giving me real space in their life. I don't get to act like they aren't, and I don't get to be a coward. And so many times they're like, oh, it's not that big. I've heard people as they come in and out of my office talking about this stuff. It's not that big a deal. It's just part of the dating process. I didn't really talk to them ever again after all of that and whatever. And I'm like,
no.
That is not okay. They are human beings, and you are just trying to say it's okay and it's just common because you don't want to acknowledge that you're a coward in your behavior.
Well, and when you don't have a mutual community where like you're like either it removes a lack of accountability
Yes.
for how we are
Oh,
actually
totally.
treating and responding to each other.
Right, because if we were all friends with a guy who did that, we'd
Yeah.
be like, dude, you got to freaking talk to her.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
got to
we
break
would
up with her.
Right.
Totally hold them accountable. to that.
Yeah, and I think this goes for girls too. Girls, ghosts, all of these things that you're talking about are not gender specific.
None of them.
I know a
No.
million guys who pace too fast. I know a million guys who have been ghosted by women. Like,
Oh,
it's,
totally.
So none of this is a gender conversation, but it is valuable because I know there's been times when guys have just stopped responding and you have actually like texted them back and been like, okay, it
Yeah.
seems like you're not responding anymore.
Yeah.
I think that we shouldn't communicate or
Yeah.
like,
I'm like, I'd love to understand if what's going on, but if you choose not to, not totally understand, but I'm like, it just depends on where you are. Sometimes you're like, well, let it fade.
Yeah,
And then other
okay.
times you're just
Right.
like, this isn't a big deal. But then other times like, no. We've gone out a few times. I actually would say most of them actually have just naturally faded where we're
Yeah.
like, we both see like, so
You
these
both
are,
know.
these are like the more like extremes
Yeah.
that I'm telling you. These are not my
Right.
norms.
normals. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And there's been so many great dates that you've gone on and
Yeah.
so many incredible situations. But our heart is that you, if you're listening and you're dating, that you feel empowered because even like, let's say that you're a guy and you're terrified to break up with a girl. This is what dating's supposed to do. It's supposed to help you grow into yourself. It's supposed to help you grow to have honest voice. It's supposed to help you learn
Yeah.
the skills you didn't get in childhood about how to do conflict and relationship. Like both the guys you dated, if they saw it as an opportunity, like, oh, I've never been vulnerable like this with somebody. Because here's the truth. You're safer than probably anyone they'd ever met.
Oh yeah.
You're one of the most safe people.
In the dating
And-
process.
And,
Oh
so
my gosh.
I am sure that the level of I bet they shared more than they ever had shared.
They both said they did. Yeah.
And that scared them. And instead of them saying like, oh, dating is the gift to pull me into wholeness,
Yeah.
to pull
An
me into
invitation.
freedom, it's an invitation. If they would have seen the invitation, this could have been the most transforming thing that ever happened to have somebody who's so safe and soft as you. Especially, I know their stories. I know the families they grew up in. You could have been the most redemptive thing to them if they would have seen the invitation of dating. And so for any of you listening out there, I want you to not see it as the goal is marriage. That is a goal and it's powerful.
Sure.
But the goal is that you become who you are made to be and you learn how to treat humans the best you can.
Which is, would you say that that's been a fulfillment in the dating process for you?
Definitely been part of it. I think I think it's like any relationship. Like there's going to be hard conversations, and are you going to actually step into them when they're hard and say the hard things, which aren't fun? Like trying to tell someone you're not interested in them, it's really hard. It's way easier to just go quiet
Yes.
and dehumanize them. Like,
Yes.
and I felt the like I want to do this. Like I don't want to have this conversation.
Totally.
Absolutely.
But like it's like okay, I'm going to act like an adult and do this.
I love that. I'm going to act like an adult.
And even though nothing in me wants to. So I'm like, no, it's made me learn how to have harder conversations. But then in that you build skills so then they're not as hard as they used to be.
Yeah.
Do you have one piece of advice maybe that you'd want to like throw out at people on the dating process? I mean, there's so many nuggets of wisdom and gold throughout all of this that they can be pulling from what we're saying. But is there something that like, say if you were, let's put it this way. If you were having a conversation with Megan when you had started this whole thing, like what would you tell her back then?
I think you're trying to make sure you figured stuff out way too quickly. We didn't really touch on it, but like when you're dating, like I think, and then like, oh, this might be the one, only date them. I'm like, we've gone on one date. And so like, I don't know enough. And so like to actually not have to have it all figured out and be open, keep yourself open to multiple possibilities. Like I have had weeks where I'm like this week, like went on 3 dates and you're like, and I'm like, and there's one I'm really interested in. I'm like, oh, I'm like, don't go all in because he's communicated, not ready to go exclusive. And I'm like, I've got to match where you are and
That's so
nothing in me
good.
wants to. Everything in me wants to like, all the balls are in that court. But I'm like, he's being really honest and told me what's going on. And so I'm like, yeah, go on other dates. Like this is healthy. This is a good choice. Don't have to make one person be the one.
And the goal again is that you find person that you fit well with. But anytime that we pick one person before that is actually, and I remember dating Justin, learning how to pace is probably one of the hardest things in relationships.
Yeah.
Because we all love that amazing feeling, the addiction feeling in the beginning where everything feels magical.
I want to talk to you every day. I want to text you all the time. And I'm like, oh,
I want you to be my whole world.
Yes.
I want an instantaneous like life partner. And so pacing like with how much time you spend with people, pacing how much of your heart you give. I don't know if I've said this, but the night that you were proposing, I was going to break up with you because I knew that pacing wise, I couldn't pace any longer. I was like, I had been holding my heart like slowly. And I just hit the point where I was like, I'm going to be all in a second. Like I don't have it back to hold. I'm going to be like, you're my person. I want to be with you forever. And so I knew like that I was going to break up with you because I thought it's not fair for me to put all of my eggs in this one basket if he's not there. But then
I put all
the eggs in the basket. Very convenient timing.
I put
you have
something
the basket?
in your basket. I put something in the eggs in your basket.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Ugh.
Any final thing?
To
wrap this
just
up?
wanted to say, like, if you're on the journey of dating, it's very courageous. If you have friends who are dating, it's so important to be moral support. It's a season of life that is hard, and just reminding them who they are, having hope for them, caring and being interested in this part of their life. It's just an important thing to actually realize there's a cost to dating.
There is.
Yeah.
And just admiring, like, I so appreciate, Megan, your vulnerability, your bravery, your intentionality, you running after being powerful, you not being a victim in this area, you staying soft and growing. It's just been really beautiful, and I'm really, really proud of you. And if you have single friends, I'd love for you to go tell them things you're proud of them for.
Yeah.
And that's it, I guess. Go tell them things you're proud of them for.
Yeah. It is.
And if you're
astounding.
single and you're being a chicken, whatever you need to do to take inspiration, take 1.5 years and then jump in.
That's all it takes, guys. 1.5 years.
I will say this, my challenge out there to the guys who are listening to this process, because it was all around kind of the feminine perspective. And like we said, it isn't gender specific, a lot of the stuff that's going on here. But when it comes to you as men, my challenge out there is for you to risk and be brave. And part of that risk and bravery in your dating process is the honesty aspect, and the honesty aspect in the ways of what you want or don't want, and not run. Use every opportunity when you feel like, oh, I don't think this is a match, or I don't want to participate in this any longer, to actually embody your manhood and your confidence by having a healthy, kind and loving, but very honest conversation, especially when it requires it. You know, there may be moments where it's not required, where it's like, I had a couple text exchanges, maybe one coffee date, it was unnecessary. But really, when you've engaged a woman's heart multiple times, you can tell that there was chemistry, and then all of a sudden you decide you don't want to be part of it. Figure out how to have that conversation. You're going to feel so strengthened. You're going to feel so capable, and you're going to feel like a man in that process as you have more of those dialogues. And you don't have to have a woman like Megan here hunting you down to try and get you
Lord,
to actually step up to the plate and be a man. So that's my challenge.
Yeah. And I would challenge the women that as well, to be honest.
It was my challenge to men. All I wanted in the entire podcast
is to say, be a man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Remember, if you got anything out of this, rate, review, subscribe, share on social media, do all of that stuff. And thanks for joining us.